Any kind of violent or aggression, whether it's physical or verbal, generally is coming from this pumped up, inflated warrior, which is another reason why a lot of times we tend to shy from the warrior archetype a lot, is because it's caused so many problems with abuse in the home, wars. All of that is being kind of born out of this inflation of warrior.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the pod. You've got your host, Anya Shack here. And today I want to talk about a topic that comes up often, especially in women's circles. And I think it comes up in men's circles as well. There is this thing that happens in culture where there are two types of men that are shown to us, right? There's the bumbling idiot dad, kind of like can't get his shit together, Homer Simpson, like Phil Dunphy guy, right? Or there's like the other guy, right? The bad boy, right? He's sexy, he's hot, he's cool, he's got the motorbike, he's Mr. Big from Sex and the City, he's James Dean. And it's like, that's all you get. You get a bumbling idiot, or you get a bad boy that will cheat on you. And it's like we're in this world where we still see that over and over and over again. And over the past many years now, I'm very clear there's a third type of man out there. Women I know are very clear there's a third type of man out there. And so today, what I really wanted to do was bring on a man who can talk to us about who this third type of man is and how he comes to be and what is he, essentially like how he comes across. What are the things that he embodies? Where does he come from? How does he become himself? And so I'm very excited for this conversation to dig into the four main masculine archetypes, which is, as far as I've learned, when a man kind of goes on the journey to understanding what those aspects of himself are, he then can make his way towards being this third type of man that is not seen in the media, but exists deeply, 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 and through mythology especially. So I want to welcome Mr. Scott. Scott, what's your last name again? I'm like, why am I blanking on Scott's last name?
Harris.
Harris. Yes. Yeah. See, we make little mistakes and it's all good.
Yeah, all good.
So Scott Harris is awesome. I met him a little bit over a year ago. I actually was on his podcast, and he is so interesting. And what I love about him is that he is an expert essentially in understanding these four archetypes and mythology and blending all of his experience coaching men into his very, very unique coaching program. So he's a holistic life coach. He's also a personal trainer. He's a facilitator for the Unmasked man. And so he's been super involved in the health and wellness space, personal trainer and meditation teacher for over 10 years. And so the podcast that I was on is called Hero in Progress, where he literally shows you the progress of this kind of third way of man, which is really cool and exciting. He's super passionate. He's super excited. And I love that we get to have this conversation. Welcome, Scott. Hello.
Thank you for having me. And that was a wonderful introduction. It's so cool to be on the other side of it for a change, being a host of a show. So it's just, wow, feel like I don't have to do anything.
Yeah, you just get to like react and just give us your wonderful wisdom. Yeah. So take a moment of, with what I just said, and like, is that true for you? Have you seen that kind of pattern happen in media?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's, it can be a little more colorful than, say, type A and type B, but you kind of hit the nail on the head in terms of, essentially, you do have kind of the bumbling, let's say the weaker willed kind of guy who doesn't have all of this shit together. And then you've got the go-getter, macho, alpha male. Yeah. And I think you see a lot of that in our political leaders more than anything. The flip end of it, what's known as the tyrant king, which we can get into a little bit, which is the inflated shadow of the king. And that's really the problem, I think, with the world in general right now, is our leaders are, as Rod Boothroyd says very eloquently, is we're being led by boys. And a lot of the work I do, and the work that was done for me and facilitated for me, was getting back in touch with that inner boy. And finding out what was wrong with him. we're born into this world, perfect 360-degree personality, little golden ball of pure energy and happiness. And
Mm-hmm.
then along the way, a lot of these different ideas and ideals are imposed upon us. We're shamed, we're ridiculed, we're made fun of. All these things accumulate and create our personality. And I think what this work is about is getting back to the core of your personality. And as you mentioned, it's about having there is that third man, and the
Mm.
key to that third man is unlocking the reasons why you're a bumbling idiot, or why you can't get your crap together, or why you're a workaholic, or why you're
Mm-hmm.
pushing yourself so relentlessly all the time. And once
Mm.
men are able to start asking themselves those questions and have the courage to delve deep into those and
Mm.
seek out those answers, that's where you can find that the third man, as you say. And I like that terminology, that just call it the third man.
The third man. I've seen him in like two of my favorite movies, I guess. The Third Man, which
Mm-hmm.
would be again, this is a fictional man because I've recently met more that are this way, but in the past I haven't. Rob Roy,
Mm.
and then Daniel Day-Lewis's character in The Last of the Mohicans.
Mm-hmm.
These two
It's
men
been.
are like very honorable, you know,
Mm-hmm.
strong and loving. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I haven't seen either of those in a while, but beautiful films. It's funny. I
Yeah.
saw something about Last of the Mohicans today come up on my
Oh.
feed. Anyway, it's just a weird synchronicity
Oh,
thing.
that's so funny.
Maybe the universe is telling me to rewatch that film. I've seen it once and it was a long time ago,
Love
but
that.
yeah, there's a lot of really good, wonderful examples. And I love cinema. I grew up
Yeah.
loving myth and story. My dad used to take me to the cinema almost every Saturday,
Ah,
and that's where I really fell in love with all of it. But yeah, there's a lot of really good examples of quote unquote the third man in
mm.
cinema.
Okay,
Um,
great. Well, let's think about those and maybe we'll send a list out to all the people
yeah,
listening.
yeah.
Um, I want to ask you this. You said that little boys are running our countries right now. And then you said your journey started when you went to figure out what was wrong with the little boy. So what does that mean? Like to become a man, you have to meet your little boy?
Yeah, you have to, as my former coach Alexander says, or said, is the king welcomes all aspects of himself to the
Mm,
table,
mm,
all the broken pieces, all the shadows, all the wounded little bits of ourselves. And as men, we need to face those pieces of ourselves, the ones that might be holding us back, the
mm,
shadows that are making us feel shame, guilt, unworthiness. Um, and yeah, I was guided through this work, and where it really began for me, amongst other things, was a very toxic relationship that I had been in,
mm,
where I was the nice guy,
mm-hmm.
right? The doormat, which is very much the passive shadow of the warrior. And I was willing to do anything and everything for somebody who was narcissistic and very toxic. And when that relationship ended, I was really left. I remember I had to talk to my own dad, and he had to reassure me that I was a good person,
Mm,
because I believed everything that she had said, and I believed that I had just completely failed.
mm.
And it was around that time that then I delved into the meditation world, and I detached from everything, because I thought
Oh,
that I thought that was the answer. Now, well, I'll just forget it all. I'm not equipped for this. I'm going to detach and become hyper spiritual, and
spiritual bypass, right?
right, and I'm just going to detach. And that was a beautiful period in my life, because I really was grounded, and I was very quote unquote spiritual at the time. But eventually, that detachment led to this wanting and this feeling of like, hey, I'm still on this planet here to experience life and this journey.
Yes.
It's not
Yes.
meant for me to just sit and meditate all the time, or not create or nurture relationships.
Yes.
Um, so
Interesting.
when I found Alexander and the Unmasked Man, I was just in a stage in my life where I was tired of feeling. When I say broken, I don't mean like I was a mess, but I was just always felt like I was either going through the motions in life, or um, sometimes feeling overly emotional, and I just felt like I didn't have control of my inner self, which
Mm,
in the lingo of Unmasked Man, and the work I do is we use the term inner kingdom. So part of that process, he led me through a lot of guided meditations, and there were many a times where in that visualization, he would create this picture of me coming in and seeing my younger self,
Mm-hmm.
and coming to this realization that all this boy ever wanted, all he still ever wants, is to be loved.
Mm-hmm.
But that boy is always seeking that love outside of himself, externally, whether it's through accolades, accomplishments,
Mm-hmm.
recognition, love from another person. And it was in that moment and through that work that was so empowering, was that I was able to love him and give him the love that he needed myself.
Mm.
I was able to hold that space for my inner boy. And circling it back, I was able to ask those questions like,
Yeah.
why are you feeling this way?
Yeah.
What's hurting you so much? And unlocking the answers to those questions, so many aha moments. You're like, that's why I'm a nice guy in relationships. That's why I'm a pushover.
Totally.
All of these answers started coming up to me throughout the work, and that's where, yeah, it really, really shifted for me, was and still is sometimes, recognizing when the boy comes up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a really quick good example of that would be in modern society, or whatever, is, and you see it a lot when say in men, where there's like a knee jerk or overreaction to
Mm-hmm.
something,
Mm-hmm.
that tends to be some shadow in the boy that
Yeah.
is lashing out, that is in defense mode, that is in survival mode, rather than having that king energy of stopping, going, whoa, let that land. I felt that. My boy felt that. Why did my boy feel that?
Yeah.
Deep breath. Oh, okay, that's why. And then you proceed and react
Yeah.
that way, rather
Yeah.
than flying off the handle.
Ooh. Oh my gosh, you just like brought up such vivid imagery for me, because I've gone through a long healing journey as well, as you know, but now I can actually watch, because I'm have a much closer relationship with my father now, which has been a beautiful thing
Mm,
to rebuild. But I watch him overreact, like pretty much with everything all the time. And that was the thing that, when I was a little girl, I was really scary, because it was just like aggressive and intense. But now, as an adult who has healed that, I see it, and actually I become so compassionate, because I actually
mhm.
see the little boy in those moments. It's like that's all it is. And it's so wild, and I feel so like compassionate about it. I just want to like give him a hug, and I do, and it's become the most like healing thing in the world. So it's just taken
That's
years to get here, but
Yeah,
being here is really spectacular, so I can feel
yeah,
that, like I really feel what you're saying.
yeah. That's amazing. That's totally amazing, and that's what it's all about. Is because once you do the work yourself,
Mm.
it opens up so many doors of understanding for other people. Like, similar to me, my mom is long gone now. She passed away in 2006, but there wasn't the perfect relationship, and I had to work through some of that through my
Mm.
work with Alexander.
Yeah.
And he did this wonderful visual, and I brought this up before on my podcast, where he guided me through this visualization where I'm the young boy, and I come across like a sandbox, and it's my mom, and she's my age at that time, like young girl. And I
Yeah.
remember just sobbing uncontrollably in that meditation, because that was that really deep recognition of what you just described, where I was like, my mom meant well,
Mm.
but she was just wounded like everybody else, like from her
Totally.
parents and all of her experiences. But at one point, she was this beautiful little girl with dreams, aspirations, and it changed my relationship and how I viewed her, and then also how I viewed my dad, my grandparents, my siblings, my friends, my partner, like everything. It completely made a lot of sense. And as you mentioned, it's much easier to feel compassion, because you just
Mm.
see it. You hope that they'll figure it out. You hope that
Yeah.
they'll maybe do the work
Yeah.
themselves. But at the end of the day, at least you have just a deeper understanding for what they're
Yeah.
going through, and
Yeah.
all the nuances of the shadows they face.
Mm. Totally. Just it's literally this, I talk about it all the time. I think I talk about inner child work over and over and over again because I believe so deeply that uh it is the path. It is the path to internal peace. I really do believe that. And so love to hear about your journey. And I would love to now move into, okay, so you went on this journey, you found your little man, and archetypes. Like you discovered the
Mhm.
archetypes of manhood. And I would love for
Mhm.
you to just talk about, I know there's a lot of levels of this, what they
Mhm.
are, what are their dark and light sides, why they even
Mhm.
matter, and yeah, why it's these four. Like what is this? Explain.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to believe they weren't even a part of my life 2 years ago, and now they've
Oh,
become just such a huge part of my life. And it's interesting. As I mentioned, I grew up watching cinema. I love story. I love myth. I always connected to. It was my escape too. I
yeah,
mean, when
yeah.
things weren't going well as a child, that was my way of feeling something too, because I grew up in a home that did not express its emotions very well, and I think cinema really provided me this place or this thing that I could
Mm-hmm.
watch and cry for that character, feel that emotion, and
Yeah.
and relate to that.
Oh,
So, later in life, what happened was as I started to get into the online space and online coaching, I just started to get really interested again in Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey and the stages and what the hero goes through.
yeah.
So I started researching and studying that a lot, and then I met well, not met, I came across a an author named Carol S. Pearson, and she wrote some books on archetypes. There's one called the Hero Within. Then there's Awakening the Heroes Within, and she
Mm,
covers, I think her first book it's 6 archetypes, and then the other book she has 12. It's a much more involved, expansive kind of
yeah.
um, archetypal work. And she wrote another one for women called Persephone Rising, which I still have on my bookshelf. I have not read it yet,
Cool.
but yeah. So then I'm trying to remember now. So then what happened was through her work, I came across King Warrior Magician Lover.
Okay.
Then I had Alexander from the Unmasked Man come on the show, and I just resonated with not just the archetypes and how he spoke about them, but him as a man and the type of man that he was, a fully, completely rounded third man.
Mm,
And I decided to work with him because at that time I was just really struggling with what I want to say is king energy, being able to step into my sovereignty, and come from a place of abundance and gratitude,
so
joy.
just to interrupt you real quick. So like
Hmm.
just imagine people listening don't know what these four archetypes are.
Right.
What are they? Just basically.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so, the archetypes kind of originated with Carl Jung, and then professor of psychology Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette, they wrote this original piece of work called King Warrior Magician Lover in the early 90s.
Hmm.
And Robert Moore did a ton of lectures on these archetypes. So he's basically taking the Jungian type of thinking around
Mm,
psychology. And through his work, he came up with the idea that the male psyche is composed, metaphorically speaking, of king, warrior, magician, lover.
cool.
And I was drawn to it as much as I love Carol's work. What I liked is that there's only four,
Yeah.
but they're very complex within themselves.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, there's the four of them. There's the king, the warrior, there's the magician, and then there's the lover. Each archetype of the quadrant has two bipolar shadows. So they have an inflated side and they
Okay.
have a deflated side. And that's where we really, when you do this work, you get into where your issues predominantly lie.
Ah,
Um, am I expressing my inflated king too much? Am I deflated? And there's never a cut and dry answer because we're fluid beings, so we're always kind of moving through these archetypal energies. And as Robert Moore said, you don't want to become an archetype. That's never the goal. That's like, and
yeah.
he quoted Star Wars in this, which I love. He's like, when an archetype gets a hold of you,
Mm,
It's like the tractor beam in Star Wars. It's going to pull you in and it's not going to let go.
mm.
So yeah, through this work, meeting Alexander, and then there's another wonderful book, written by Rod Boothroyd. He's been on my show multiple times, and he wrote a book called Warrior, Magician, Lover, King, and it's just an updated, kind of
Cool.
more modernized version of the '90s book.
Sweet.
Um, and that book is just that's like my little Bible for this stuff, because he takes everything that Robert and Douglas did, but I think he just elevates it and grounds it in a very understandable language for men to understand in today's world.
So take me through this a little bit. So it sounds like the updated book, he starts with warrior. Is there a reason he does that?
It's funny. I've never asked him that, and
Okay.
before we hit record, as I mentioned to you earlier, I've had a lot of people asking, when you're working with the archetypes, which one do you start with when you're
Mm,
coaching? Should you start with king? Should you start with, there's all these differing opinions. And recently, I've
yeah.
come to the conclusion that I actually think warrior is the way in.
Yeah.
Why Rod has put that first, I'm not sure. But whenever I have him on the show and we do a four-parter, he's always warriors first, then magician, then lover.
Cool.
So I will ask him that, if there's any reason why he's done it in that order. But
Um, that's cool. I heard, well, like I follow a lot of Alison Armstrong, and when she talks about the stages of a man's life, she does talk about this like, going off and becoming this warrior, to
mhm,
like, go off to college or pursue your first job. That is more important than finding your mate. If
mhm,
you find your mate before you know who you're going to be in this world, then like it's not right. So maybe
right.
there's something to that.
I think, well, there's the I don't know how to explain this. The archetypes have their own arc, I think, within the grand scheme of
Okay.
a person's life. Like
Okay.
Rod talks about it in his book. And first and foremost, the first archetype we are all engaged with is lover,
Okay.
because we are dependent on our caregivers, and
Yes.
we are seeking that love right from the beginning, which is why we get so fucked up,
Yes.
is because we're so vulnerable, and everything our parents say is it's gospel. Everything we
Absolutely.
hear, we're a sponge. We're just
Yeah.
taking it all in.
Yeah.
So generally speaking, for all of us, the lover
Mm,
is the first archetypal energy that we are, born into or infused with.
mm.
Now that being said, for each of us, it can I think change according to what type of parents you
Yeah,
have.
of course.
You know,
Beautifully said.
yeah, I had a very aggressive and angry mother who had anger issues, and I had my dad who was this very, weakened kind of king slash warrior who just sat on the couch and kind of cowered from confrontation. And so
Mm,
as a child, I'm picking up these signals of what is the right way to be, and I think we kind of become this mishmash
yeah.
of what we're taking in. Now, what you did touch on, which is true, and I think this is another problem with men, is when in tribal cultures there was always an initiation for boys into the tribe where they become men. When
Yeah.
they take them out into the forest and they give them a spear and they say go kill something, and then come
Yeah.
back and now smear the blood on his face. You're now part of our
Yes.
tribe, right? Women, they have that marker of becoming a woman, right?
Yeah.
So boys don't have that.
Yeah.
So that I think does contribute a lot to this men becoming toxic and struggling, I think, with what does a man need to be.
Totally.
I'm not saying we need to take our boys out into the woods and make them kill something at all. But I think some form of proper initiation for a boy into a man is important. And I certainly think that yeah, that's where I've come full circle now, and I feel
Yeah.
like men are generally, a lot of men are afraid to do the work. They don't want to talk about the lover. They don't want to talk about their feelings.
Mm,
But I'm starting to shift towards the idea that I think the way in for a lot of men is through warrior,
okay.
healthy warrior.
Okay. Let's talk about that. And then I also wanted to bring up, because you did mention king a few times, like,
Hmm.
can I tell you just like one of my biggest cultural pet peeves?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, let's go.
I really can't stand when men like are calling each other kings all the time. Hey, king, what's up? Oh, hey, king. And they're calling 12-year-old boys little king, and they're calling them, and everybody's a king suddenly. And I know girls are doing it too. Oh, hey, queen, you're so great. Like, you're the
Yeah.
queen. And I'm just like, men and women
Yeah.
are both doing this in a very silly way. And I'm just like, this
Yeah.
boy literally hasn't had a single male influence yet. We're calling him a king. That's not right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel you on that one. And I think that this kind of stuff lands a little bit, I think, in the realm of it's a bit of an inflation. There's a danger in the sense, I think, that it's important to instill confidence in young men, for sure, right? And to incorporate or help them with their self-belief. Like I wish I had that as a kid, like somebody that really I think it's Robert Moore that says, a boy needs to smell his dad. He needs to get up close and
Mm.
smell his dad. And I never really had that.
Ah,
So I think it's important, but I do think there's a big problem happening in the world today with that kind of stuff. And I get a bit of the same reaction. And when I work with the men, there are these moments within the circle where we say, a hand on the heart, and they open up and we say, "I see you, King. Like I
yeah.
see you." And that's acknowledging their sovereignty. It's acknowledging their
Mm.
gold, so to speak. But when it comes to just like out in the regular world and interacting and things like that, or even on social media, I see a lot of men that they just use it a lot, and it does bring up a little bit of a similar reaction in me, where
Yeah.
I just think when we do this work, spiritual or deep work, there's a fine line that the ego is slippery. Yeah, I see it mostly in the spiritual realm, like
Totally.
the spiritual realm of like, I'm so spiritual. I'm downloading these messages,
Right.
and there's all of that plus what you just described with like sort of this, like everyone says, calling themselves kings and queens.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a similar reaction to that pet peeve, and I think, to me, my opinion is that's still born out of more work to do. Because
Yeah.
I think the minute that you start over identifying with something
Yeah.
and recognizing yourself as, like, again, Robert Moore, you don't want to
Totally.
become an archetype. There are
Totally.
certain situations in life where you need more lover, you need more magician, you need an amalgamation of two or three or what
Right.
have you. But I think also it's maybe a compensation because men are still really struggling to find their way. So when they find that king,
Yeah.
it's like then they got to be always king, king, king. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm a
Yeah.
king, you're a king, we're all kings, go kings, and it's just too much. And yeah, the
Mm,
women, they'll do the queen thing as well. So
totally.
um,
It's
yeah.
it's like I happen to believe that for most women, um, like I'll say this right now, like I don't believe that I can be in my queen energy, really like fully embody that until I become a mother. For me
Hmm.
personally,
Hmm.
I believe that mother is a key archetype in the female experience for most women. There are many that don't need that. Their souls aren't on that path, and that's a beautiful thing as well. But I think most women do want that. And I think
Hmm.
that's really just, important. And then I think to become a mother that is successful, right? You must be a maiden first and then a wise woman.
Hmm.
And it all kind of flows together. And so yeah, I don't know, I was just contemplating on that, and I'm curious if a similar feeling comes through for you around, like when I think of a king, I think of a man who's contributed to society in some way, and he's
Hmm.
become a partner, and he's like become, I guess, taken ownership over a family, taken on responsibilities.
Hmm.
That's like what I envision a king to be.
Hmm.
I don't
Yeah.
know if that's how you feel.
Um, I mean, I think a man can be a king without having children. However, I also have had my own feelings of it's just different if I was a father. It's a
Mm,
different level. It's a different level of kingship.
yep.
that
Okay.
is required. But yet there are, again, there's many things that a man can do who is not a father
Yeah.
to be kingly. There's you go back and I'm sure down the stretch, when there were a lot of kings, they didn't always have offspring, but yet they were good leaders, and they were
True.
able to
True.
be kings. I think with women, it is much deeper because
Yeah.
you're giving birth to this being and this child, and
Yeah.
I think there's just something so inherently powerful about what it means to be a mother.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree with that, and at the same time, yeah, because I just turned 50 this year, and not
Woo!
100%, yeah,
You
not
look like you're
100% sure if,
32, Scott.
yeah, I know, good genes, and I take care of myself. But I mean, I don't know if there's a kid down the pipe anytime soon, let's say.
Yeah.
Um, I think I'm going to lean more for men on this one towards, and this is, I think it was Robert Moore again that said this, or it could have been Robert Bly. But for men, the tendency to step into king energy is when they reach their 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
Like it's this thing where regardless of whether you've had children or not, it's you've gained this kind of life experience, and that is really when you start to a man has really stepped into that energy of knowing who he is and what he's all about, what
Mm,
he wants to what he wants to contribute to the world, what his grand vision is for the world, and what have you. So
mm,
but that being said, I mean, I think it's just so complex and nuanced in the sense that like everybody's journey is so different, and I
totally.
think and I think we enter these different stages of life that are very archetypal heavy. I
Yeah.
spent a lot of my youth. I would say when I was in my 20s, 80% of my energy was lover energy, whether it was in shadow,
So what does
healthy.
that mean? Yeah, talk to me about lover energy. Like what does that mean?
Well, as I mentioned, like each of the four archetypes, they have an inflation and a deflation. I
Okay.
like to think of it as like imagine a volume meter on a stereo.
Okay.
So 10 being the max, zero obviously being the bottom. You want achieving balance with an archetype is being in that, five range.
Okay.
But what tends to happen is we inflate or we deflate, and we tend to spend more time in one or the other. Generally, we will bounce back and forth, but certain personalities and certain people will struggle with certain inflations and deflations. Like the inflation of the lover is the addicted lover or the wild lover, and that is someone that's always looking for the continuous high in life, and they're essentially addicted to love too, right? Which
Yeah.
to fulfill themselves. They're never satisfied. They're always looking for that next high. They're the person that invites you out to the party all the time, right? Oh, come on, we're gonna have a good time. Come on, you got to get drunk. You got to come have some drinks. Blah, blah. That's inflated lover,
It's
right?
like the
And
Casanova kind of guy.
yeah, a little bit. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Always looking for that next conquest,
Yeah.
that next woman that he can, bed with or whatever. And then the deflated lover is naturally is on the other end of it. It's a lot of these depressed feelings of not being lovable.
Mm,
Um, each archetype has a key emotion or a
mm,
gateway emotion, and the lover is grief. Um, so a lot of the lover is layered in grief, and not necessarily when people think of grief. A lot of times they think of a passing of a loved one
mm.
or something dramatic. But I mean, you could be grieving not having a strong father,
Love,
not
yeah.
having a strong like it can be more nuanced. Grief is not just limited to those catastrophic intense moments.
Yeah.
Like again, bless my dad, I have a good relationship with him, but he's always been a softer man, and he's been a nice guy his whole life. And I went through a grieving process through this work where I missed not having a strong masculine presence in my home to truly
Totally.
take me under his wing and say, hey, son, here's how it is, and teach me all these values and things like that. That was really bestowed upon my mom. She was kind
Mm,
of playing both roles, which only angered her. So again,
yeah.
yeah, that's kind of the
So when because one of my favorite things to do and one of the things that people that listen to the show have commented that they love is super tangible, like real world, like today kind of anecdotes. And so, for example, is being in a healthy aspect of the lover, like being a man who maybe has been working really hard on a project the last week, and then like realizing that, potentially he hasn't spent enough time with his kids or his wife, and then like owning that, and then devoting an entire weekend like where he's like super present, really there, doesn't check in on his work stuff, and he just like really is there. Is that like kind of finding the balance?
100%.
Okay.
100%.
Cool.
100%. And when a man who's doing this work and connects with the archetypes, it's not for everybody. That is when a man has done this work, he's delved into his shadows a bit, he's got in touch with the inner boy, he gets more in touch with that king energy. And
Cool.
what you just described is that moment where the king steps in and says, hey, you've been working way too hard and you've been neglecting this area of your life. I think it's time
Mm.
that we do something nice. And so the king is there to basically say, a little bit more lover energy, like let's go,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And within that there's the king energy. If you're spending time with your kids, I'm babysitting tonight actually with my partner's little relative. Like she's like
Cute.
yeah. And the first couple of times I was there, like she's 5 now, but we've been babysitting for about a year and a half, and immediately the energy I feel is lover king.
Love it.
Because even though I'm not her dad, this
Yeah.
this child is in my care. She was on the jungle gym in this outside in the summer, and I'm watching
Yes.
her, and I'm kind of, for that brief
Cute.
period, I have to step into that kind of energy.
Cute.
So I could feel that king energy coming
Ugh.
on, and that lover energy. But it's spot on, and that's what it is. It's being aware of those things,
Yeah.
which energies you're spending a lot of time in. And to be honest, for most men, it is going to be magician and warrior are the two that they get trapped in.
Okay. Um,
Play a game. We're gonna play a game.
let's play this game. This is a fun game. What does it mean? So, like, give me an anecdote, an example of a man who is spending too much time in warrior energy. What does that mean?
Well, that's where he's obsessed with work. That
Okay.
would probably be one of the biggest examples
Okay.
in his lifestyle. Another good example, and you see it a lot in men, is overtraining at the gym. Their whole
Ah,
life becomes the gym. I have to train. I have to be, it's the physical body expression of the inflated warrior, and then it's also like the lifestyle. So it's the workaholic. It's the
mm,
and then from a lot of that, that's where you see a lot of hyperaggression in men. That's inflated warrior. Any
mm.
kind of violent or aggression, whether it's physical or verbal, generally is coming from this pumped up, inflated
Oof.
warrior, which is another reason why a lot of times we tend to shy from the warrior archetype a lot, is because it's caused so many problems
Ugh.
with abuse,
Yeah.
in the home, wars.
Yeah.
All of that is being kind of born out of this inflation of warrior.
Can I tell you? And it's funny. So, okay, we have these 4 archetypes, and we're about to get into, I want to get into magician because that one's a little hard for
Mhm.
people to understand. But back to warrior, like I used to know a man who, like, the warrior, it was like definitely the dark warrior energy. And you like sprinkle some self sabotage on top of that with his like inner child stuff that he didn't
Mm.
understand yet. And I remember he had this thing where he felt like he didn't deserve like quality sleep. So he would be like until
Mm.
he like got certain accolades in his job. So like he wouldn't let himself get more than 4.5 or 5 hours of sleep. Um, in as a way of like punishing himself for not having achieved the goal. And I just remember hearing these things and being just like
Mm-hmm.
horrified at this.
Mm-hmm.
And now in retrospect, I realized this man was in very unhealthy warrior energy. Whoa.
Mm-hmm. And it might be because when he was growing up, that's what he was taught. That's what he learned. That getting 8 hours sleep, you're weak.
Yeah.
get your ass out of bed. You're weak. And that's where as well, as I mentioned, we can kind of fluctuate between that inflation and deflation,
Mm,
and that dial is never just set.
mm.
And Rod talked about this on the show recently, and I couldn't agree more with this, is that for a long time, lover archetype was the one that was thought to be where men get the suicidal thoughts, and they go into
Oh.
the heavy depression. But he actually said that he thinks it's more linked to warrior, because warrior is about feeling you have the right to exist and own your space. And
Mm,
if you don't feel like that, you are in deflated warrior. And that goes with the nice guy, right? It's like you're sacrificing your boundaries with other
mm,
people. You're letting people just invade your little private bubble or whatever,
mm.
because you don't feel you have the right to exist. And
Totally.
to take that further, um, I like to think of the analogy too with the warrior, in that sense of it's like turning your sword on yourself.
Yeah.
So if you're the inflated warrior, you're taking up your sword and you're just charge, and you're flailing and cutting and
Yeah.
hurting people along the way.
Yeah.
But the deflated lover also has, or sorry, the deflated warrior has this element of that self-destruction, and that inflicting self-harm and
Mm,
punishment on oneself.
totally.
So yeah, but
Yes.
yeah.
Wow. I definitely, I can see suicidal thoughts coming from the deflated warrior. Absolutely. Um,
Mhm.
Wowza. Okay. And I even myself, I don't think I am very clear on magician in a real tangible like human man life way. So can you explain what it means to be like too much in your magician or to like not be enough
Oh yeah.
magician? What does that mean?
Yeah, we love the magician when we talk about it. Whenever I have this conversation with Rod or anybody, we all chuckle. The men who know this work
Okay.
really
Okay.
bond with this archetype, because it is the most complex,
Okay.
because he's elusive.
Okay.
He's the smart and cunning part of ourselves.
Ah,
There's um, as far as the magician goes, I think if you want to bring it into more modern thinking, the inflated magician is the one who thinks he knows it all.
got it.
He's always the smartest guy in the room.
Got
And
it.
then the deflated magician is the dummy. He's the one that like just believes he's stupid. He doesn't have anything good to offer the world or anything smart to say. He's should just keep his mouth shut.
Mm,
That those are some modern examples. Obviously, there's a lot more than that. I think, yeah, the inflated magician loves to overthink, likes to overanalyze everything. I
mm,
think one shadow I struggle with is the perfectionism is born
mm.
out of the magician. The
I see.
magician wants, and a lot of that comes from, I think through my research, I want to say the magician is there's the two P's: perfectionism and procrastination.
I see.
And procrastination lies in the deflation, perfectionism lies in the inflation,
Right.
right? Because
Right.
the deflated magician is going to procrastinate about everything and
Right.
not take any action and talk himself out of everything. One thing I want to touch on to really help clarify the magician a lot is, for most of us, we spend our life in magician mode, especially in today's technology. It's all thought. We're constantly thinking, absorbing. Like when we're scrolling social media and reading and absorbing and learning and not learning and watching, that's all magician energy, right? Um, so I think that's a really an important thing to bring up
Yeah.
for magician energy. And the other real quick thing is there's an element to the magician called the safety officer. That is the part of ourselves that is born and designed to protect us from more shame and more guilt. So
Mm,
the magician in us loves to avoid certain situations. Like that's the part of us that steps in and goes, "Oh, whoa, whoa, wait! Remember the last time you did an oral presentation and they laughed at you?
mm.
We can't
Yeah.
do that.
Can't do
Oh,
that.
don't go to that weekend retreat because you'll be asked to talk about yourself, and you know how that feels." And so and that is born out of childhood. That's born out of that. So the magician is very present from a young age, and a lot of it is designed to protect us. And The magician rules the throne more often than not in today's world, and for a lot of us, because and prevents us from doing the things that we love to do because we talk ourselves out of it. We're scared. The primary emotion, as I described earlier, was grief for the lover. Guess
Huh?
what it is for the magician? The primary gateway emotion is fear.
Fear. Oh, it's fear. That makes so much sense. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
So
Okay.
yeah.
So, okay, because that was my question. You essentially answered it, but I just want to make sure I get it because I'm like fascinated by this stuff. I just like it's so fun.
Mhm.
Because yeah, when you were talking about work, and like using your brain, I was like, what's the difference between that and the warrior? Because like the warrior is the guy that works too much. So like, what's the difference? Because I'm envisioning like, a white collar dude
Mhm.
sitting typing and stuff.
Yeah.
So you really explained it. So then if the magician is the more mental space, then yeah, what is that distinction with the warrior? If the warrior is still related to work.
Well, they all play off of each other. In
Okay.
a way, you could imagine your inner kingdom. This is all metaphorically, right? But
Yeah.
it works, and the men tend to connect with the language a little bit. But a good example would be the warrior is about action. So he puts the king's plan or he puts the magician's plan into work. A lot of times,
Oh,
the magician is calling the shots, not the king. So that's the problem,
I
right?
see.
A good example too, to bring it down to earth a little bit, is a really good sign would be like the warrior might push himself too hard physically,
Mm,
and he's in that go 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 attitude. But then yet you've got the magician is that part that when you go to bed at night and your brain won't shut off and
yeah.
you're always worrying and thinking about all the things that you got to do. That's
Mm,
like I like to envision that like that's literally your magician is keeping
oh,
you up at night and he's like taking notes for the next day.
oh,
And then you wake up and guess what happens? Warrior goes, okay, here we go. We got to execute that plan that's been laid out for us, right? So, and then that's where the king and the lover need to step in with that with their energy. But a lot of times it is essentially uh, and I mean we could do a whole conversation on magician because there's all kinds of stuff in the
yeah.
world today. I had a guy on my show, Angel Millar. He wrote a book called Path of the Warrior Mystic, and he talks
Uh-huh.
a lot about warrior magician energy in that, and how he believes we're in the time of the dark magician because
Yeah.
what's happening in the world is and this is where shadow magician, inflated
Yeah.
magician comes in, is manipulation.
Yes.
The
Totally.
inflated magician will manipulate. We live in a world right now that is very heavily manipulated by government, by social, by the news, and all these different outlets and
Totally.
things like that. So it is very that's we are being essentially controlled by dark, inflated magicians.
Yeah, I hear you.
So yeah, you just apply that to your own life and look at your own life and think about where am I or where am I not exuding,
Yeah.
those sort of attributes. Just as a quick example, I know when I was younger, a good example of that magician coming in all of a sudden, when I was back, dating and I had these wounds, I was worried about the other guy, let's say. Good example that would be is like, okay, well, how can I make that guy look worse than me in her
Mm,
eyes? And
mm,
actually try to execute some sort of, whether it's talking about him to her, like, oh, he's a loser, or he's like, but there's that manipulation that's
mm.
going on, right? That's
Totally.
also very much, that's where magician comes in, right? And that's
Totally.
why we have to be really careful because he likes to run the show. He or she.
Mm.
For women, it would be like priestess would be probably the
Yeah.
more appropriate way to connect with that. But
Yeah, totally. No,
um,
I feel that like I just to connect those four archetypes to the female ones, it would be like queen, mother, priestess, maiden or lover, maiden slash lover.
yeah.
But this is so fascinating because like I can almost envision though too a man in his dark magician, like up all night pacing, just like not sure how to figure out maybe there's a big problem and he's just like overthinking and like
Mhm.
that could also potentially cause suicidal thoughts too. Just like, I don't know how we're going to have enough
Mhm.
money this quarter. I don't know what we're going to do. I don't know if I can deal with it. Wow.
Yeah, and I think trying to apply these, that's the challenge over the last couple of years for me is trying to have these conversations and applying it to relatable situations in
Yes.
life.
Yes.
It's great to connect with them on this mythical level. Absolutely.
Yes.
That's why they work. But it's important to have these conversations about, yeah, what are some really like real world examples of this archetype and that archetype, and where have they kind of been popping up in my life? Like a really good one right now for magician that I've noticed, I think I touched on this already. Perfect example is inflated spirituality is probably one of the most obvious ones, where you see a lot of people that they're just so detached from this reality.
Mm,
The real the guru-y type people, the ones that
totally.
are like, and then what happens there is that they use their power and their influence. That's how cults are born. That's how all this dark stuff, insidious stuff is born. And they pull people in that are weak kings and queens who are abdicating their power over to something else because they don't believe they have it within themselves. So like, oh, and we've all done it. I've done it, where you just get
Oh.
so you religiously follow somebody like they're everything, like they have all the answers, right?
Mm,
And that's kind of part of that, and that's where I see a lot of that, especially on social media. And I tend to it's a bit of a pet peeve of mine now, actually.
mm,
I tend to disconnect a lot when it becomes real fluffy,
totally.
hyperly.
Totally.
I don't and I
Oh my
love
God.
that stuff. Like I love spirituality. I believe in higher self. I don't believe in a religion per se, but I do
Mm,
believe in something, right?
hmm.
But I don't know. I think there's a lot of self-proclaimed priestesses and
Yeah, totally.
magicians out there. I'm like, who made you the downloader of all,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I
Yep.
get very, very wary of that. And again, that's very much in the
Yeah,
magician. Yeah.
totally. Listen, it's like the people that vibe with this show, they're like, all right, we're healing, we're loving, but we're doing it in a down to earth way. So it's like
Yeah.
that's
And
kind of how I
and
vibe.
what you were saying earlier about the whole when you're in your king, or whatever, that energy. The funny thing about that too is it's like you're always going to be fluctuating and moving through this stuff. I've been less in my king this year than I was last year, 100%. And I think part of that is owed to the fact that like I've been exploring different parts of my life more than I was last year. There's things that have just taken a bit more precedence. But the important thing is I've always been aware and said to myself, "Hey, be careful there. Watch that. That's an old pattern. That kind of that's still king awareness." But
Mm.
I think that's the thing. The reason I bring it up is like you said, where everyone's always talking about, I'm a king and I'm a queen. It's like but all the time.
Well,
So you're flawless. So you're flawless now, is what you're telling me. That's why I think it maybe rubs you the wrong way and rubs me the wrong way, is because it's this kind of grandiosity. It's inflated king, because the inflation of the royal couple is that idea of like you're pumping your own tires. So whenever I see anybody pumping their own tires a lot and talking about how great they are, I immediately just I'm like, wounded boy, wounded child. You're inflating yourself because of,
mm,
I know, because I done it.
yeah, no,
And
it's
if I'm not careful, I'll do it again.
yeah,
It'll
it's
happen
totally true.
again.
It's totally
Uh,
true. I think I think language is really, really important and we underestimate the importance of it. And I
mhm,
I think it's interesting because a lot of men that I talk to do use this language, this terminology that goes like, I'm in my king, or I'm more in my magician, or in my. And it makes so much sense, for especially for coming from you, coming from somebody that has gone through an extensive process of understanding what this stuff means. But I think when it's someone
mhm,
brand new, or someone that might not even have had the time yet to embody these archetypes at all, it's more like I'm wearing the outfit of a king,
mhm,
but not really that. And so
mhm,
that part is hard for me to hear as well, because I'm just like, okay, it's probably true that all of these things exist within you, and they must come out at different times. in your life to serve you and the people around you in the best way possible. And so how do we square that? Like, how do we deal with that, the distinction between bringing it out of you, that which already exists, versus wearing the outfit, you know?
That's that shadow work. That's
Yeah.
knowing when you fall and prey to wearing the mask of the king. It's that thing where you can fake it. You can put on that I'm a healthy king.
Yeah.
But more often than not, people are going to figure it out, or eventually your kingdom's going to come crumbling. And
Yeah.
I think honestly, social media is a perfect place where you find these, I don't want to say false kings, because
Yeah.
I think some of them are doing amazing work and I think they're doing amazing things, but they've fallen into this idea of I always have to portray greatness. I always have to portray this kingly persona, which again just becomes another mask that you're wearing. And something that and that's another reason why I took a break from social media, is because I felt myself going down that road a little bit where I was trying too hard
Yeah.
to be a king. And
Yeah.
I realizing that I'm still a king in progress. Like I always will be till the day I'm gone. And
Yeah.
I think that's what I feel like I'm seeing a lot from men online now, is they've done a lot of this great work, but sometimes it's so slippery again. You start drinking your own Kool-Aid.
Totally.
Because the more we elevate, right, the more we do, the
Mm.
more we learn, the smarter we get. Of course, right? It makes sense. But there always has to be this level of, and this is the thing with the king that I think's missing, or I think a lot of times what's missing is humility.
Yeah.
A good king doesn't need to proclaim he's a king all the time,
Totally.
right? He's humble within that. He just leads. He just does it by example. So I think that might be another
That's it.
reason why that when that comes up, it's bothersome, because it's like you shouldn't have to tell me you're a king if you are.
Yeah.
I should just feel that energy.
Yes.
And you've met men like this. I've met men like this.
Yes.
I've met women that are queenly, where it's like, whoa, like they don't have to, they're not tooting their horn, they're not pumping their tires. You feel when someone is just whoa in some really good vibe and king energy or queen energy. So
Cheers to
that's my
that. Love
that's
that.
my red flag. I think that's my same thing with the priestess thing or the guru thing. It's like if you're taking the time out to talk about how wonderful you are, that's the little boy.
Love that.
Yeah.
That's so true, man. The humility piece was huge. I was thinking that while you were speaking too. I was like, humility. It's so beautiful. It's such an incredible quality. And it gets really confused with low self-worth for some reason. Like people confuse the two. It's like, no, I can be proud of who I am. And because I think there was like a Russian phrase they used to say when growing up, even in my house. It's like something negative about being not humble. Oh, it's like when you say something that like you're bragging about yourself. The Russian people say something about like humility wouldn't kill you. That's what they say. Like basically like you should be more humble. And then you take it as like a don't speak about yourself. But most kids, especially in that situation, take it as like don't believe in yourself. That's the distinction. It's like, yeah,
being humble is really just finding those moments in life to acknowledge when you make a mistake and acknowledge that you're not perfect, that you're and I think a lot of what's happening in the world right now is I've seen this shift in the last couple of years. I think the men's movement has done some incredible things, but I worry again sometimes too that understandably so, men feel like masculinity's been under attack a bit. I understand and I relate to that. However, the answer is not to get defensive and not to self-inflate or to revert, like to flex your muscle more.
Right.
And I don't mean physically flex it. I mean like that whole energy of like come on, men, let's be men. And, like, it's like, no, no, I think the universe is, with everything that's going on, is it's getting to, as you described at the top of the show, is this third man. And
Yeah.
this third man is neither masculine nor feminine. He's both. He's able to express both energies, and he's comfortable in both of those energies, right? It's I saw this father and daughter on Instagram, and they do these sing-alongs together. And
Mm,
I'm watching the father, and it's beautiful because it's just like he's in his lover energy with his daughter, and it's
hmm.
just, but he's not afraid to be a goof, and he's not afraid to show this dancey feminine side. And I'm like, we need more of that. We need more men to show that side of it and not always be so stoic with life. And that's where I think the archetypes are helpful, or can be helpful, is
Mm,
once we tap into that, is flex all the different muscles of the quadrant, and share all those sides of yourself. And I believe that every man has those sides, the intelligent,
mm,
smart, clever guy, who can help people out of difficult situations with his magician. He's a healer, right? He's a good
mm,
lover to his partner. He listens well, which is very much king energy. The king listens.
mm,
And then he knows how to make decisions, difficult decisions, get things done in the world. He's disciplined, but he's not a slave to his discipline,
mm,
which is
mm,
something that happens a lot in the warrior
mm.
quadrant, is we become a slave to these disciplines. But it's
Yeah.
all based out of fear and avoidance. I mean, this is all of this ongoing work is hard work. It's challenging work. It never ends. Um, which is why I think the fault that happens with this work sometimes is we can self crown ourselves prematurely, or I feel like I had a bit of a crowning moment at the end of my time with Alexander, but I made a joke with him 3 months later. I'm like, yeah, it's interesting. I felt like, oh yeah, I've been crowned. I'm a king. This feels amazing. And then all of a sudden, that lover shadow popped back up, and I'm like, oh, that's life. Here we
Hmm.
go.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
definitely.
I love how you described all that. That's literally where I was going. You read my mind, Scott. That's perfect.
You asked the good questions, though. That's the thing, and I'm taking a lot out of this conversation with me,
Mm,
because through this is important stuff. It's like how, and I've
mm.
been having this conversation in my head, is how can I share this type of work, but apply it more and more to day-to-day life, and not be something quite so abstract.
Yeah. And I think one thing that you just said is really interesting to me is you were just talking about how, men are all of these archetypes and it is hard work, but then I think to myself, it's it may be hard work in this modern day and age, but if men just learn to tune out of all of the distractions, they'll find that these archetypes live within them. Like it's so
Mhm.
natural, like it already is, like you don't have to do anything extra. um you are these archetypes. It's just about listening to them and being brave and following them. And so I think like the man you described, this third man, like that was so beautiful. I would say the only thing I would add would be like has great boundaries and is like
Mhm.
so ready to kind of take the lead in times of uncertainty and difficulty, right? And I think
Mhm.
that's just something that is so needed. And I think women
Mhm.
are craving that aspect again.
It's honestly the bare basics of it is it's self-awareness. It's
Yeah, totally.
before we finish, I'll tell a real life experience for me where the archetypes came into play earlier this summer. My girlfriend, my partner,
Hmm.
there was a birthday thing going on in Seattle, and she wanted to go. She wasn't sure what time it started. She didn't want to drive her car. I would have to rent a car. There was all these different variables, and at one point, I was didn't want to get a car, right, to go across the border for only 2 hours, because this thing was like 2 hours. So part of my analytical magician mind is assessing this whole thing and strategizing and going, this doesn't really make like a whole lot of sense. Like, we're gonna go there for 2 hours, like blah 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 blah. And then her tone of voice was like, okay, well, fine, I guess we won't go. And I could really my king, I like to think it's my king, picked up on that tone and picked up on that disappointment. And in that moment, it was like the king kicked in and was like, warrior, go, go. So then I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna go look for a car right now. I'm gonna rent one, blah, blah, blah. So warrior went into action, started doing all this stuff, planned it all out. And she was now in that point where she's like, well, no, you don't have to do it. Just forget it. I'm like, nope, we're going now. We're doing this. And that's the warrior overriding the situation saying, no, 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 I fucked up. Like, we're going. You want to go to this thing. And that's the most important thing, is that this is important to you and you want to go. We're going. Planned it all. We drive out there. We weren't there for just 2 hours. We ended up going back to her nephew's place for the whole day. Day, wonderful conversation, spent a lot of time on my lover energy, blah, blah, blah. We get back in the car. We're about to leave. I'm about to pull out. She just looks at me. She's glowing, like she's happy, right? And she just looks at me and she's like, I'm so glad we did that. I had such an amazing time. I looked at her and I said, I'm so glad you enjoyed yourself. But inside, I was getting the goosebumps. I wasn't tooting my horn. I wasn't doing it, but I just, in that moment, I was like, thanks, King. Like, thanks for coming. Thanks for coming through on that one and making me realize that I was being selfish. And not just selfish at that moment, but there was some fear in there. It was all of that, like, I'd never driven across the border before. There was all the cost of this and that. And it was just all that dumb crap that the magician was doing to protect me. But in the end, I was like, man, just do this for your woman. What are you doing, man? Come on. And it was all worth it. And in that moment, I'm telling you, that's what life is all about. It's those moments when I looked at her and she just, we weren't making out. It was nothing like passionate and crazy. She just looked at me and it was like, I was able to help her have a good day. And all it took was for me to lean more into this king and further away from the other energies. And that's where I think the work has benefited me the most, is the language works. And it's like, I can have that moment of assessing my inner kingdom and saying, hey, let's go. So yeah, that's just an example. Like, because on the phone with her, all these other archetypes were arguing, blah, 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 and then finally the king just went, whoa, I'm in charge. This is what I'm sensing. You're scared. This part of you scared. This part of you doesn't want to do it because of this. We're doing it because it's important to her. And and what's important to my kingdom is that my partner, my queen, is happy too, right? That's a huge part of it, right? So yeah, just that's kind of a quick example, just one really quick, but that's an example for your listeners in terms of just how the thought process can work for men. In terms of just viewing their life and taking responsibility for it.
Don't downplay that. That was such a beautiful story. Well said. Like, really great story. Like, I'm so grateful you shared that. Like, the most perfect way to end. And I really did imagine, like, all of your archetypes talking, just like the busy noise of like the kingdom where like everyone's there and like the jesters like throwing around, juggling and stuff. And then the king walks in and everybody's like silent. And it's like so powerful.
But imagine now, this is the work, right? Imagine if you're a man whose king is drunk underneath the table and he's not taking any responsibility for his kingdom. He's not entering the room. That's the problem. What's going on in the world, right? Is that that's the thing. So a beautiful part of this conversation as well is that idea of like, I think it is silly when it's like, I'm a king all the time. No, you're not. You're still the scared boy. You still have a manipulative magician. You still have a warrior that wants to prove all of this stuff.
Yeah.
But because you've connected with that king energy, you can now call upon him when you need to enter the room, hopefully. Right. So I think that's a huge part of it, is that, and we are these complex people. Every situation we get into, our brains are on overdrive, our bodies want to do this and that. And I'm telling you, just breathe, invite that king, invite that queen energy, and to just slow everything down. Right.
Such great advice, such beautiful conversation. Very inspiring. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I would love, first off, cheers to all the wonderful men doing this work and bringing their kids, their kings online, which is
And
just
women too that are just doing whatever, doing their part. I think that's, yeah, shout out to the women too. Yeah.
love that. See, it's like we're both shouting out to our people, to our respective opposite our what word am I looking for? Compliment, our compliments. Yeah. So thank you so much. Before you go, let the people know where they can find you, where they can access you. I would love it if they had the knowledge of where they can find more of you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Instagram. My handle is at it's Scott Harris, and my website is www.warriorwithintraining.com. That does have information for my one-on-one men's coaching program up there. I will probably sometime in the new year be running another Brotherhood of Kings, which is the men's group version of my one-on-one coaching program. And next year, yeah, I plan to bring some Steel Mace Flow into the work as well. I've just been working on those certifications, but yeah, I think I think the key to men, why I said earlier about warrior, is because men connect with their body a lot physically, like, and there's a way in through that physicality to the lover and to the emotions. But it's the two together. There's the physical exertion exercise, but then like the Steel Mace Flow is much more of it's almost like a dance, or it's much more of like it's a more of an expression in a different way. It's a softer energy while still being masculine. So yeah. Anyways.
I love it. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'll put all that stuff at the bottom of the episode so everyone can find that. And I love that name, Warrior Within Training. That's dope.
That was my PT business for the last 15 years, because I started as a personal trainer into this health space. And as I mentioned to you earlier, it's weird how it's all of a sudden the thing that I was trying to shed from my identity and avoid is now I've come full circle, and I'm like, now Warrior Within just means something deeper. Especially now that it's just funny how that is. So yeah.
Yeah, I love it.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
and
thanks so much. Go ahead. Last word.
No, I was just gonna say thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
I loved having you on. This was such an awesome conversation, so rich, and dynamic and fun. And I hope all of you listening have really enjoyed diving deep into the archetypes and the third man. So until next time,